So welcome to all of you to our September Climate Cafe, where we are going to be looking at the new Inflation Reduction Act and how we can maximize our energy efficiency and lower our carbon footprint through the new legislation. Now, I know that all of us calling in from abroad cannot take advantage of many of these rebates, most of these rebates, and tax exemptions, but it's good to look into. You can help your friends and your family back home. And I hope that we'll also be able to talk about how we in our respective countries can also help lower our energy costs and our carbon footprint in the house, in the home, and how we conduct our daily lives. But we're going to take a deeper dive to begin with into the legislation and what it means for our capacity to mitigate climate change and how it's going to help individual families and households. So, any questions? No? So I'm going to share the screen. Give me a minute. And pull this up. I won't be able to see you all because sharing the screen. So if there are any questions, raise your hand and Angela will catch it. So here we are, maximizing your energy efficiency through the Inflation Reduction Act, our IRA toolkit. And I want you to know that if you're interested in receiving this slide deck, we're happy to forward it, and we will be posting it on our website under Earth Care tools, our Earth Care toolkit. So just to give you an overview of what it's doing, the Inflation Reduction Act in a nutshell, the total revenue that will be raised is $737 billion, 15% corporate minimum tax of $222 billion, prescription drug pricing reform at $265 billion, IRS tax enforcement, $124 billion. Can you imagine all these people who haven't been paying all of their taxes? We're going to get it. 1% stock buyback fees at $74 billion, and loss limitation extension at $52 billion. And what will we be investing in? We will invest $369 billion into climate change mitigation, the largest investment ever in history. The Affordable Care Act extension will get $64 billion, and Western drought resiliency will get $4 billion. So overall, if you look at the comparison of these two, there will be a total deficit reduction of $300 billion. So all of this good work that we're going to accomplish, and yet we're going to bring down the deficit, which is pretty amazing. So the legislation will expand Medicare benefits. They were going to have to cut off free vaccines this year. Now they'll be extended to 2023. There will be $35 a month insulin cap starting in 2023 for people on Medicare, which we wanted to extend to everybody. But anyway, it's something that it will be extended to Medicare. I'm sure all of you know what a problem it is that people are basically dying because they cannot afford the exorbitant fees of insulin. They're going to cap out-of-pocket drugs to $4,000 in 2024 and down to $2,000 by 2025. Where individual households will lower their energy bills between $500 and $1,000 per year. And of course, which is well known by now, we will we expect to reduce our carbon emissions roughly by 40% by 2030. Now, Biden's has made a pledge that we will bring it down by 50%. So we still have work to do to bridge that remaining 10%. It's very important. But 40% is a big step forward. We're going to be lowering healthcare costs. It will save $800 a year per individual for ACA Marketplace. It will allow Medicare to negotiate 100 drugs over the next decade, and will require drug companies to rebate back price increases higher than inflation. We'll create lots and lots of clean manufacturing jobs. 60 billion plus will be invested to create these new domestic clean manufacturing jobs. Investments in disadvantaged communities, 60 billion is earmarked to clean up pollution and to try to address these environmental justices, which are many in tribal nations all over redline communities. There's a lot of work to do there. We're going to close some tax loopholes used by the wealthy, not all of them that we wanted. There were some compromises made there in the final hours of the legislation, but there will be a 15% corporate minimum tax now and a 1% fee on stock buybacks. And there will be this enhanced IRS enforcement. So lots more people that are going to be hired by the IRS to go after these wealthy individuals who have been evading taxes for so long. This will protect families and small businesses making $400,000 or less. So you will see an improvement if you make less than $400,000 per family. So, doesn't seem to be. There it went. So now to get more into the climate change mitigation and energy savings aspect of the IRA. There's so much more in other areas, but this is what we're really focusing on today. We're going to lower your energy costs and reduce your carbon footprint. And so each family, and this is a cap, every family can get up to $14,000 in rebates and tax credits to make their homes more energy efficient. There are lots of ways to go about that, but there will be a cap, and it's quite a bit of money. You'll be able to get a $7,500 rebate when you purchase a new American-made electric vehicle, and a $4,000 rebate on the purchase of used electric vehicles. 40% of carbon emissions, as you may or may not know, stem from buildings. So these incentives for upgrading your homes could help the U.S. achieve its goal of lowering fossil fuel emissions through two separate rebate programs. And these programs are the Homes Rebate Program and the High Efficiency Electric Home Rebate Act, otherwise known as HERA or something. This does not want to.
There it is.
So these two programs, the Homes Rebate Program is basically deferring it at the state level. There'll be $4 billion going to the individual states to help make homes more energy efficient. They'll provide rebates based on energy savings in upgraded homes. Homeowners can cut their usage by at least 35%, who cut their use by at least 35%, get up to $4,000 in rebates. And that's doubled to $8,000 for low and middle income households. Now, the high efficiency electric home rebate, the HERA, provides for low and middle income families to electrify their homes by installing heat pumps or electric heat pumps or electric clothes dryers. Per household rebates are capped at $14,000, as I said. And households can't receive two rebates for the same upgrade. For instance, if they claim a home's rebate for a heat pump, they won't get it through the HERA. Next slide. And this is kind of a breakdown on some of the different things you can get. You can get $1,750 for a heat pump water heater, $8,000 for a heat pump for space heating and cooling, $840 for electric stoves, cooktops, ranges, ovens, and electric heat pump clothes dryers. You probably didn't even know those things existed that are driven by heat pumps. $4,000 for an electric load service center upgrade. And that means when you get an electric car and you want to install a charging unit at your home, which we had to do when we got an electric vehicle, a plug-in vehicle, and those can be pretty costly. And you need some way of charging at home if you can. $1,600 for insulation, air sealing, and ventilation, and $2,500 for electric wiring. Next slide. Beginning in 2023, the rebates will also be good for $150 for a home energy audit. And that's really basically the first thing you need to start with is it's like, how do I know what to get? How do I know what to do? The best way to start is having an expert come to your house and say, this is faulty, this needs upgrading, you could do this to take advantage of these rebates. So the government is going to help you better understand how to weatherproof and modernize your home and energy efficiency. There'll be $250 for new exterior doors. I guess a lot of doors don't insulate well enough. I was really surprised to see that. $600 for exterior windows and skylights, central air conditioners, electric panels, and certain related equipment, natural gas, propane, and oil water heaters. These are propane, oil furnaces, or hot water boilers. Surprising. $2,000.
Found this on the web for propane oil furnaces or hot water boilers. Surprising. Check it out.
That was my Siri. Always listening. $2,000 for electric and natural gas heat pump water heaters, electric and natural gas heat pumps, biomass stoves and boilers. And for this one category, the $1,200 annual limit may be exceeded. Next slide. For eligible home improvements after 2024, no credit will be allowed unless the manufacturer of any purchased item creates a product identification number for the item, and the person claiming the credit includes a number on his or her tax return. The revised credit will be extended through 2032. Not bad. Next slide. The residential clean energy credit, I started to talk about that. Current residential energy efficient property credit for homeowners will get a new name under the Inflation Reduction Act. It's now called the Residential Clean Energy Credit. Okay, not big difference. This credit was previously scheduled to expire in 2024 and will now be extended through 2034 as well. Next slide. And the Inflation Reduction Act boosts the credit amount. previous credit was worth 26% of the cost to install qualifying systems that use solar, wind, geothermal, biomass, and fuel cell power to produce electricity, heat water, or regulate the temperature in your home. The credit for fuel equipment is limited to $500 for each 1/2 kilowatt of capacity. Credit amount scheduled to drop to 23% in 2023 and expire in 2024 now jumps to 30% from 2022 to 2032, then falling to 26% for 2033 and 22% for 2034. The credit expires after 2034. The scope of the credit is also adjusted in 2023. It no longer applies to biomass furnaces and water heaters, but it will apply to battery storage technology with the capacity of at least 3 kilowatt hours. That's interesting. So we're moving into the necessity to upgrade our battery storage technology. Next slide. And alternative fuel refueling property credit. The alternative fuel refueling property credit expired at the end of 2021. It was given new life by the IRA, extending its application through 2032. For homeowners, the credit is worth $30,000 of the costs of qualified alternative fuel vehicle refueling property installed in the home, up to $1,000. So that's the charging, the refueling charging units. In 2023, the credit applies to the purchase of bidirectional charging equipment, so that you could just, which you can charge it both ways. So which you can charge the battery in an electric vehicle and allow you to discharge electricity from the battery back out to the electric grid. Because some people are, they've got alternative energy, they've got solar panels, and or perhaps wind, I doubt it, but perhaps wind or other kinds of, and they need to be able to sell that energy back to the grid. We're changing our whole system. Next slide. High efficiency electric home rebates. Although not a tax credit, the high efficiency electric home rebate program does help Americans go green. This program provides rebates to low and middle income families who purchase energy efficient electric appliances. To qualify for the rebate, your family's total income must be less than 150% of the median income where you live. It's a little tricky because, of course, people living in red line districts and low property, this one's a little bit tricky, but they are trying. Qualifying homeowners can get rebates as high as $840 for a stove, cooktop, range, oven, or heat pump clothes dryer. $1,750, and I suppose this is on top of the rebates they're already getting. This is an additional rebate. $1,750 for a heat pump water heater and $8,000 for the heat pump for space heating or cooling. Next slide. Rebates for non-appliance upgrades will also be available up to the following amounts: $1,600 for insulation, air sealing, and ventilation, $2,500 for electric wiring, $4,000 for electric load service center upgrade. I think I mentioned these. Okay, go on. Next slide. Home rooftop solar panels can save hundreds a year on energy bills. Households can receive a tax credit to cover 30% of the cost of installing rooftop solar. That's a big one. The credit also applies to solar systems that are paired with battery storage. Go on. The rebate limits mean they can't exceed 50% of the cost of qualified electrification project if family income is between 80 and 150% of the area median income. Each qualifying family is limited to 14,000 in total rebates. That's the key figure. And 4.5 billion allocated for rebates will be distributed to families through state and tribal governments that establish their own qualifying programs. Funds are available through September 30th, 2031. Next slide. How to prepare. Schedule an energy audit of your home, which typically costs about $400. And they're offering then the $150 back, the rebate on so the government will pay for $150. If you can find a cheaper one, the cheaper you can find, the less you'll pay. But the government is subsidizing them at $150, I think, starting in 2023. Start contacting contractors to line them up for projects when the rebates and tax credits become available. And educate yourself about the types of equipment helpful for your own house. And I think that's it. So we can keep it there in case anybody wants to go back, or we can go back if you want. But this is an overview of how the IRA is going to help individual families back stateside who can take advantage of all these subsidies and rebates. Yes, Inga.
This was really interesting, Dana, and I'm dead keen to see those slides again. There's a lot of numbers going by and it all looks very positive.
I know, it's a lot.
But one question I have is, I mean, obviously this model, as you're describing, is really good for individual homeowners, and the stress as framed is for that. But of course, a lot of people live in apartments that they own. A lot of people live in apartments that they rent or buildings that they rent. Do you have any sense, and this may be just digging too deep here, how the IRA is going to be addressing people like that who, they just know they're paying more energy bills and maybe they don't quite know how to activate that?
That is a good question. And I think as it is in Finland, where I live, and in the United States, it varies widely. You might live in an apartment complex and still have to pay your own energy bills. If you own, then you can probably get those rebates. I would assume that owners of apartment houses would be invested in trying to upgrade the facilities. But again, those who are already marginalized, those who come from communities that are redlined, from tribal communities, may get some subsidies, but may also be precluded from receiving other ones. So it is not a perfect world in addressing environmental justice, and there has been a lot of criticism of this bill as such. And there were tremendous amount of compromises made in the IRA. As we all know, it was last minute. I see Beverly has her hand up. Did you have a comment about this?
I had a couple of questions. I don't know what a heat pump is.
You don't know what a heat pump is?
A heat pump is. What's heat pump?
It is we had actually heat pump. There are many kinds, and I'm going to defer to Diana because she's really an expert.
Okay.
But I can tell you that 2 years ago, we had a heat pump installed at our home to try to mitigate our exorbitant energy costs. But
it's
Diana
based on
is,
electricity,
calling in
I
from
assume.
France, and she is really an
Okay.
energy expert.
Well,
and I'm going to ask her
okay.
if she wants to explain
Yes.
about heat pump
Well, I'll just
technology.
give you some basic facts. A heat pump, you already have one already. Your refrigerator is a heat pump.
Okay.
Now, to make it work for heat, you turn it inside out. So basically what you're doing is you're taking you're going to take heat from the outside of the house when it's cold out and put it into your house, which is already warmer, right? So you're pumping heat from one place to another. And this takes a lot less energy than burning something and capturing that heat. In fact, a lot of heat pumps have a coefficient of productivity of around 3, which means that you get 3 times the energy out that you put in, because you're moving the heat, you're not creating the heat, if I can speak metaphorically that way. Most heat pumps nowadays are based on electricity. There are some that are hybrid with gas, which means that when it gets very, very cold and it becomes very hard for your heat pump to work, your gas heater can kick in. But I mean, I was told for the Paris area, that might be as much as 2 weeks a year. Not much, in other words. It's not as though it's going back and forth between the heat pump and the gas boiler. You're mainly running on the heat pump. We have a very poorly insulated house and the heat pump works just fine. And it's an air-to-air heat pump. Some people use a water source or a ground source and they're considered more efficient, but it takes a lot more to install them.
Yeah, we
Anyway,
have water to air.
Yeah, that
And
will
it is messy.
It's messy,
endeavor.
very efficient once you get it put in. But it's fantastic because, you know, when you look at what you want to do to decarbonize, the main tools at your fingertips are A, changing your car for an electric car and changing your gas burning heater for a heat pump. That's one of the key technologies, the heat pump. Okay.
Okay, I think I know what you mean. And in Germany, that's only available for a new house. It's not something you can install in a house that is years old or 100 years old, for example. But at a newly built house,
I
you
don't
can-
think so. And
can use it.
Naomi is nodding her head and she's got her
Okay.
hand up. So I'd like
Maybe
to
I
hear-
don't understand it then. I'm not sure. I'll have to look it up and see what it is in German. I can't imagine what you're talking about then.
So here in Lucerne, we're in the process of organizing the development that I live in to do a multi-phase installation. And it is a combination of tapping into the below ground heat using pumps with solar panels. And we are doing all of these houses. My house was built 90 years ago. So it's an older house and this is a retrofit. So retrofits are definitely feasible and it is always more cost effective to do it as a collective where you are doing it with a group of houses. So you're not doing this independently. And this is done in collaboration with the primary utility. So here it's Electro Water Lucerne. In New York City, it would be Con Edison. There would be different mechanisms to open the dialogue to start this kind of conversion to sustainable energy.
So your energy provider. So the first step would be probably to contact your energy provider in your area.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. It would be, there should be organizations locally that are interested in doing this, in facilitating it, government entities that are offering rebate in conjunction with the IRA. And it depends on that house construction, what's available in terms of alternative energy resources, all of this that needs to be looked at for the final product. But it is not just about new houses, it's about existing houses. And all of this urban heat island index. All of this, it can all be done using retrofit technology. I mean, professionally, I'm an urban forester and a consulting arborist. I'm working with communities in New York City, in elsewhere globally, on how to tap into technology to accomplish different sustainable procedures that reduce or mitigate climate change impacts.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
are you, this is very interesting, Beverly. I love hearing your explanation of what you've been doing and what they're doing in Switzerland. And I too was a little alarmed, but I understand that's how it is now in the States, that they are talking more about transitioning away from fossil fuels, but they're still utilizing it in this package, in this rebate package.
Yeah,
Which
sure.
is-
I mean, it's a bit disconcerting to see natural gas
Mm,
included. We have the technology to move beyond the fossil fuels,
Yep.
and we should be doing that wholeheartedly,
Yes.
not dancing around it, not halfway, not, well,
absolutely, but you've got there were
Well,
so
you-
many just to get this bill across because of Manchin and Cinema.
well,
know
you
that
saw
there were,
yesterday that Manchin had to pull
I know,
his amendment
I know,
because
I
of
saw
this
that.
huge pushback.
I saw that. But
Wow.
that also came on a day when we're having a massive leak of methane natural gas
Yeah.
in the Baltic.
I
near
know.
where I live.
Yes.
So,
It's horrible.
Yes.
Yeah, Dana, I found a little like 2-minute video that explains how a heat pump works.
Oh,
Should I
let's
show it?
play it.
Oh,
Okay, cool.
Thanks,
Great.
Angela.
See what we have here. All right, here we go.
Hey, it's me, Dave, and this is a heat pump. It's an energy efficient heating and cooling system you can install at home. How does it work? Here, let me show you. Your typical Aerosource heat pump, like this mini split system, has two main components, an indoor and an outdoor unit, which are connected by a refrigerant line. To heat your home in the winter, the outdoor unit pulls heat from the air outside your home. Yes, believe it or not, even when it's cold, outside air still contains a certain amount of heat. The warm air then goes through a refrigerant coolant that is compressed to increase the temperature even more. This warm air is then pushed through to the home. In the summer, to cool your home, the process is reversed. The heat pump absorbs the warm air in your home and transfers it outside. The compressor circulates refrigerant to the indoor evaporator coil, and the refrigerant absorbs heat as it passes over the indoor air. The resulting cool and dehumidified air then gets blown back into the home. And that's how a heat pump works. The key here is that heat pumps don't generate heat, but instead they move it from one place to another, which is why heat pumps are so energy efficient. In fact, a heat pump can be up to 300% more efficient than electric baseboards. So if you already have electric heat, a heat pump can help you save on your energy bill. Less energy and more savings? I like. If you're switching from a fossil fuel-based heating source like a natural gas furnace, you'll be reducing your carbon footprint. It's kind of like going from a size 18 down to a size 2. You get the idea. It's an environmentally friendly option, especially here in BC where we're powered by water. Plus, with rebates from Clean BC and BC Hydro, there's more to save.
Okay, thanks. That's what I thought it was. And when we inquired about that here, it was only available, we were told it was only available for new homes. But I wonder what would be the difference. We're heating our home with solar. Would that be more efficient than solar? I would, or more energy?
Yes.
We decided on solar instead.
The
Diana would like
difficulty-
to say something.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Just to say that the heat pump runs on electricity. So if in addition to your heat pump, you have solar panels and, you know, over the year, you know, a lot of the energy to run your heat pump comes from your solar panels, then you're even more decarbonized.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so what
Mm.
company, there's a company called Energy Sprong, and there are others like this cropping up that are putting together sort of a one-stop shop solution where you would get solar panels, an inverter, battery storage, a heat pump, the connection to charge up your electrical vehicle or have your electrical vehicle charge your home. And so there are people putting together packages so that it becomes very easy to put these on an older house. Okay, and also heat pump, they're working on the efficiency of these things. So in time, even a real, what they call a passoire énergétique in French, a sieve, a house that really lets the energy through everywhere, even those can be served eventually by heat pumps. It's true that the better insulation you have, the less your heat pump even has to run, you know, to keep you warm in the winter. And in countries, in Italy, for example, they have a wonderful rebate system to get a two-way heat pump. That is one that gives both air conditioning and heat in the winter. So, you know, that's really the best option because of climate change and heat domes and things, to get the one that can give you that occasional air conditioning too.
Mhm.
As
And it'll
the
be
little
interesting to
video.
know what's available in the United States. I'm thinking more of my relatives in the United States, what options they have, and they seem to be frustrated because they're not getting anywhere. And we have a link to a source for somebody in California. What's available? What makes sense for your home? Where can you get the best advice?
Ingy?
Yeah, I
I'm
just want,
sorry, can you repeat that?
yeah, say it again.
Oh, me? I'm thinking of my relatives who live in California. They've gotten to be very frustrated. First of all, they can't buy an electric car because the parts aren't available, and there's a huge, long waiting list to get electric cars, though I don't think they're looking at an American-made one anyway. So they wouldn't get that rebate. But regarding any update to their home, if they can get the best information, what makes sense. Heat pump, I don't think isn't really that much of an option because they never heat their home and they don't air condition either. But a pure energy source, and they looked at solar, but they got so much different information. And I can't help them. I can only base it on my information that I know, that I've researched, that I've done here where
Which
I live.
state are they in?
California.
I suppose what we suggested that of course, it costs money to bring in an audit.
Bring in an audit,
Um,
yeah. I think that's what they
which
really
they
need to
can get a
do.
rebate, $150 on, but
Can
you can
I
send
cause-
them the slide deck and they can look around, if there's not any weather concerns in terms of cooling or heating,
Heating.
then there are other issues related to home appliances,
Right,
related
exactly.
to,
That's purely what they're looking at, and to charge their electric car if they ever got one.
and if they have an electric vehicle and installing a home charger, buying an electric vehicle. There's still a lot of ways to take
Mhm.
advantage of these rebates.
But the audit is the first step, probably. Yeah, okay, thanks.
Can I just comment on that as a Californian? The
Oh,
success
Inga,
of
good,
any
yeah.
policy like this is the rollout and the information. And it's exactly what you're saying, how aware people are of this. And we're having this great discussion about heat pumps, which I'm sort of getting my head around because here in London, I live in a 66 unit building where it'd be great to get that. And I loved hearing Naomi's story. That's actually hugely inspirational. But what I was going to say is there was a program in California where they gave people rebates where you would get the subsidy to insulate. This was back in the 70s, 80s, hugely popular. Also the solar.
The
so
solar
many
in the
people I know in
70s, yeah.
California have installed solar. So again, it's good rollout, good information, making sure people understand what they can get. And you'll see people all over do it. And certainly my friends and family in California have taken great advantage of the programs that are available.
Okay.
What you might want to investigate, Beverly, is finding an NGO, an organization that is promoting sustainable energy, and they might have information available that would be less commercialized and help them make decisions. The difficulty with some water pumps, refrigerants are carbon producers. There's many issues with these refrigerants. And so you want to investigate alternative sources for fueling water pumps.
Okay, thanks.
I thought that they've changed the manufacture of refrigerants, that they're no longer using Freon, which was so.
There's still the alternatives are still polluting. So you really have to investigate and be careful about what because they haven't solved the problem.
Right. I see that Bruce has his hand up. Bruce, would you like to join us and share with us? I see your hand is up.
Okay, Bruce's camera, he sent me a message, it's not working, and maybe his audio isn't working. Can you try to talk, Bruce? No?
He just posted something.
Yeah, he said, these are my main points. We must use the IRA quickly to accelerate CO2 emission reductions by the hoped for 40% reductions. The provisions are paid for us with our taxes. In this case, we are the government. Number two, the frequency of severe weather incidents like Hurricane Ian add even more urgency to the task. What incidents have you experienced this year? And three, my own story with severe weather damage in Illinois this summer is a striking example for me and us, haha. Four, we can share stories about experiences with climate change whenever we talk with people and look at what we had to say about using the IRA to tackle our problems. Five, we can reduce plans to get 50% reduction by 2030. For that, we need to hold the House and build the Senate majority and get ready to build back better in 2023 and beyond. That means we must vote now and mobilize voters via phone banking. Join our pro-DA happy hour calling party on Friday at 4:30 CET.
Okay. Those are all good points. Thank you, Bruce. I'm sorry you couldn't deliver them in person. You're so good at that. You could try leaving and rejoining, leaving and restarting your computer and rejoining, if you can hear me, because we would love to hear from you. I see that, Naomi, you still have your hand up. Was that from before?
No, one of the things that's also concerning that has been part of the discussion between environmental organizations is that some of this will kick back to carbon offsets. And one of the issues with carbon offsets is that what we are doing to improve the situation becomes a credit to entities that still want to keep polluting. And so how do we disrupt that?
How
How do-
would that work, Naomi? I don't understand. You get a credit for installing something that reduces your carbon footprint. How could that be then done as a carbon offset? Seems to me it's about as direct as it comes.
Because it really depends on what this goes back to. If it goes back to a fossil fuel entity,
Why?
well,
How? I mean, just tell me how. I don't know. I'm asking a question. I'm not attacking your thought. I'm trying to understand.
if you are installing something, let's say it's not this private house issue. Let's say it's in disenfranchised communities that have been denied services, or it's where fossil fuel production is often located. So utility companies abusing disenfranchised communities by citing pollution creation there. One of the concerns of these communities is that anything that they do can be used as carbon offsets by the people that are creating the pollution. So
Still don't get it.
if they're doing tree planting in their communities, and a fossil fuel company is paying for that, then they can use the planting as a carbon offset to allow them to keep producing pollution. So there's been a concern as to how you create a disconnect between the good you are doing and the ability of that good to benefit people who want to keep polluting.
I completely understand. You don't understand the connection, Diana?
No.
Some people are creating, are doing things to sequester
Yeah, I
energy.
understand that. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're doing good. They're getting offsets so that fossil fuel companies,
Now, is that in the IRA program? Because I missed the beginning. I was finishing.
well, no, yes and no. It's just that we're continuing to use natural gas. We're continuing to support fossil fuels in the IRA.
Right.
Yeah, well, that
which
shouldn't
should
be there.
Which need to be This is also why we at the ECCC fervently hold that Biden must declare a climate emergency and that we must
Correct.
eliminate the use of fossil fuels. All fossil fuels. We have the technology and it's developing so quickly.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's more cost effective and it creates more jobs.
Yeah.
But the fossil fuel industry is so strong. And maybe some people are thinking, okay, this is a compromise we need to make to transition off, to help create the new jobs.
20 years ago, you would have called it a transition fuel, but sorry, go ahead.
Am I right? Is this what you're trying to say, Naomi?
Yes.
Yes.
So there's a concern on the part of indigenous communities, disenfranchised communities, that the good that they are doing that will be funded by the IRA, that part of that will get connected to facilitating the continued use of fossil fuels. And rightly so. They should be concerned.
Can I just add one little comment, please?
Of course.
Yeah, just to say that, you know, we've been trying to get rid of fossil fuel subsidies for 30 years. And they're so sticky. They're so backed by big power and the Koch brothers and everything. But I think what happened during COVID was very instructive because fossil fuel demand just sank and the power of the oil companies went way down. And I think that's a model for us in the energy transition. The way to get rid of the power attached to fossil fuel is to not demand it in the market anymore. And we do that by installing solar panels, heat pumps, electric cars, all the wind farms, you know, the whole package of good technologies, right? Because over a period of say 10, 20 years, the demand for fossil fuels is going to plummet. And with that plummeting of demand goes the plummeting of their power.
Yeah, I want to read Bruce's comment in the chat, which is relevant. While acknowledging our personal responsibility to act, we must continue helping big corporations to accept their responsibility to act. And I think that all fossil fuel corporations are not equal. They are all guilty, but some have recognized, they come to the table, they try to negotiate, they are investing in alternative energies. They are trying to take stranded technologies and utilize them. And some are doing a better job than others. And I do think that this may be the only way. We're not going to put them out of business. But yes, fossil fuel prices will drop eventually. And by that time, the smarter ones will have invested enough in these newer technologies and these alternative energies.
Yeah.
So,
The other factor I might point out is that we've seen what happens when we reduce fossil fuel supply first. What happens is the prices skyrocket, people in energy poverty sink into crisis, middle-class people go into crisis. It's hell. We have to lead the deconstruction of the fossil fuel market with a reduction of demand, because then fossil fuels go down as we increase the demand of things that are serving our needs, okay? Rather than pitching us out into, you know, the wonderland of where we don't have any energy at all, you know, which is what's happening with Europe this coming winter.
it's going to be a tough winter.
It's going to be, and it's going to take it's going to take us each taking a bit of a hit. So we're trying to work on it. They're upscaling the production of heat pumps and doing all sorts of things are going on right now in Europe, but we got to deal with demand. And that's where we have the power. That's where we as consumers have the power, and as communities, because as you said, Naomi, and I fully agree with you, a lot of the infrastructures we need to put in place are better done at a community level, like district heating, to get large scale heat pumps in place and sharing solar energy in communities and neighborhoods. You know, these are excellent projects, and not all of them are worked out yet. In some places, yes. But anyway, it's where we have the power, and it's where we put the right leading edge in place. Demand, not supply. Sorry, it's my economics background pitching in there.
Fantastic contribution, Diana. Always good to hear from you about
Thank you.
These issues. Naomi, you had your hand up?
Well, what we also need to do collectively is to facilitate banks and insurance companies investing in alternative as opposed to continued funding of fossil fuel exploration and extraction. And just recently Banktrack came out with the biggest offenders who are still in there investing, still in there funding further projects. And we collectively who support the stepping away from fossil fuels need to go after those banks and those insurance companies that are keeping those companies in business.
Yeah.
If we kill demand for fossil fuels, they won't want to invest in them either. Again, we have the power.
Bruce has remarked that we probably have to take those hits one way or the other. The transition to renewable energy is going to demand some pretty dramatic changes for all of us. Much will be exciting, but some will be painful. And, you know, on that note, I'd like to say that for us in Europe, and I think all of us, except Liz is calling in from China, are in Europe. And when I think back to the big pandemic, the beginning of the pandemic, we all decided we had to stay home to protect our neighbors. We had to wear masks when we went out, that we were all going to have to give up something and suffer for the betterment of humanity in the world. And now we are at a stage when we are all going to have to make sacrifices, and it's going to be really tough, but it is for the betterment. And the war in Ukraine has just expedited this process.
Yes.
And it's a terrible thing happening, but it's making all of us face this dilemma and really, you know, hit a hard wall where we're going to have to go through that withdrawal. We're going to have to sit home and sacrifice.
Yeah, it might end up that the war in Ukraine is going to save the climate.
Yeah, well, not if it,
Unfortunately,
not if Trump ends up, if Putin ends up unleashing nuclear weapons, but that's
Putin, yeah.
I think Angela had her hand up. I'd love to hear from her.
Well, I was curious about two things. The first thing is, are there any provisions for businesses in the IRA? Or is it strictly just families and people?
Yes, there surely are. And I did not present that today because it was meant to be on an individual basis, but yes, there are. And I can create some slides and send them out later.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I mean, I just would, you know, what businesses, what's being offered to businesses to make the transition, because for larger businesses, you know, I mean, you know, big IT firms and things like that, they use a lot of energy for servers and stuff like that. A lot of their customers and employees have demanded that they put up solar. But if you have just like let's say you have a restaurant or you have a dry cleaners or something like this, you know, you're going to need help to change over, you know. I mean, I'm sure my family used to own a dry cleaners and it was a lot of energy that we used. So, you know, I think it's really important to help the smaller businesses make the change, because a lot of people that own small businesses also own their buildings and or warehouses or whatever. Yeah. And then the other thing I wanted to say was actually for Naomi. You mentioned working with people in communities to try to help, I guess I'm paraphrasing, to do planning, to get together, to come together, to work out how you're going to make the transition. Do you have any resources that we could use? Because this is something that I've been thinking about doing with my neighborhood, to start a dialogue with the people around here about climate change and what we can do, and, you know, what we can do to protect ourselves, what we can do to help facilitate the transition.
So Angela, maybe it would be the most helpful if you and I could exchange email addresses, and I can, because for example, I'm working with one of the NYCHA housing projects in New York City, Smith houses, and they were flooded during Sandy, and there had to be renovation and reconstruction. And during this, there was severe damage to the landscape. And so if you're going to restore that landscape, then you have to remember that water has a memory. The next hurricane, the next event will flood exactly the same places that it did the first time. So what can you do with the landscape restoration that will include stormwater management? So this is part of the dialogue. And so where is the community that you are working with? What are the issues? And why don't we look at that from a community specific basis to see what can be done and what of that can be connected to the IRA.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I
So
put my email in the chat, so
I want
please
to
contact me.
quickly get back to Angela on her question. I'm going to research it further, but I did get some answer to the response on businesses. Small businesses can receive a tax credit that covers 30% of the cost of switching over to low-cost solar power, lowering operating costs and protecting against the volatile energy prices currently squeezing small businesses. And small businesses, building owners can receive a tax credit up to $5 per square foot to support energy efficiency improvements to deliver lower utility bills.
Okay, that's
Small
really good.
businesses that
Right.
use large vehicles like trucks and vans will benefit from tax credits covering 30% of purchase costs for clean commercial vehicles like electric and fuel cell models.
Great, that sounds awesome. This is a really, somehow we've got to get this out there to people to make people understand how great this is. I didn't honestly, until you showed the slides, we saw a preview yesterday, I didn't realize how in depth and how much money and how much it covers. And I think I'm going to look into, I just don't believe, or I don't want to believe that we can't use that, because many of us still have to file taxes. And it seems like we should be able to get the credits.
That's
Also.
interesting. I have a tax expert I could ask here, but I somehow doubt it. And this is just a small portion for individual homes. There's so much that is going on with in coordination with the amazing infrastructure legislation that was undertaken. They have now begun construction of charging stations every 50 miles across every major highway in the United States. There are provisions now which people can get help capping what are they called? The oil wells and natural gas wells that have been leaking. So that has already begun, because that emits methane, which is so dangerous. There's so many things that are just now getting underway that are a part of the IRA that we haven't even begun to tap into yet. There's so much that's not being done that we need to fight for. Did you have something to add, Sophia? I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I was wondering if there was anything in the bill about, since you mentioned infrastructure with nuclear energy, because it's like the best way, or supposedly supposed to be the most efficient way to do the clean energy transition, so we can move completely away from natural gas and fossil fuels. And I feel like it normally gets overlooked because people just hear nuclear and they get a little bit scared.
I happen to, there are people here who do not agree with you. I happen to agree with you coming from Finland, where our nuclear is really saving us at the moment. But I think that the bill is focusing on actual renewable energy, the IRA. And those whose grids, certain states and areas whose grids may be fed by nuclear energy, now I don't think that's a topic which is in direct response to the new legislation. But Diana has a different perspective. I know they have a lot of nuclear, and Angela has a different perspective.
Yeah,
Here in Finland, we have very safe and secure nuclear supply.
Nuclear, is much more costly than renewable energy. And though renewable energy is intermittent, in fact, one of the big initiatives right now is to promote green hydrogen as a way of balancing, getting a match between renewable energy and the grid, and also offering storage. So for example, in the North Sea, in the Baltic Sea, all along the Atlantic coast, there'll be wind projects built in with green hydrogen. Europe will also be importing green hydrogen from North Africa, and Spain and Portugal will be very big promoters of this, or producers of this. So there are a lot of ways of doing things that are cheaper than nuclear and actually don't have some of the side effects. Like, we still don't know how to deal with the waste and the radioactivity. If you looked at a radioactive map of France, you'd be astonished to find there are places where before you buy a house, you better pull out your Geiger counter.
But in Finland, they're storing it miles below the surface.
Good luck with that.
In granite.
Good luck with that. Then the other thing is when we have a war zone, a nuclear plant is like having a nuclear bomb lying in your territory, just waiting for some idiot like Putin to decide it's time to press the button. So there are big problems. Also, there are accidents, and the accidents occur about every 30 years. And I have heard nuclear experts say that every dollar put toward nuclear energy is a dollar not put toward the energy transition. It is not a silver bullet. It is a very complex and dangerous way to boil water that then you will have to deal with those sites that are undealable with for hundreds of thousands of years.
But in the meantime, Diana, though there are many plants that already exist, we're not putting more money into it. They already exist. Many places that are storing it very safely, and it is an important tool while we transition to renewable energy. Nobody's suggesting we pour more money into it, but they already exist. And and green hydrogen, and I'd love for you to explain to everybody, we're going to have an article coming out in our newsletter soon about the difference between green hydrogen and blue hydrogen and gray hydrogen.
Am I going to write that up? Yeah.
It is fairly costly up until now to produce.
Well, by the way, Bruce also agrees with me about this summer, because of the rivers getting hot and dry, it becomes very difficult to cool nuclear plants. Many have to shut down every time we have a heat wave in France. Also in France, where we have about 75% of our electricity coming from nuclear production, all the plants are aging. And so when you've already amortized the plant, then the energy coming out is cheap. But to build new nuclear is like 10 to 15 billion per reactor. It's very expensive. Anyway, I won't go. We disagreed.
We just established that we didn't want to build new nuclear reactors, Diana. We're talking about utilizing what exists
what
now.
is not talked about is you still have to mine the uranium.
Yeah.
Whose community have you forgotten about in the mining of uranium? and the dirt and the pollution and the destruction of habitat and environment that is incurred in the mining of uranium. Ask the Hopi, ask the Navajos,
Ask the French.
ask them all about what is involved with the mining of uranium to feed those nuclear power plants.
I think Inga had her hand up to speak.
Yeah, I think it was Diana who had the lovely comment. Nuclear power is a very expensive way to boil water. I think that's fantastic. My father was a nuclear engineer working for General Electric, and the arguments at my house were quite something to behold. I sort of have come over the time, you can imagine.
Sounds like fun, Ingy.
And actually, I had a brief internship with the International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna, and they were working on a thing about nuclear storage. And, you know, I was looking into the US plans for nuclear storage, which is generally kick the can down the road to the next administration, because you sure as heck don't want to do that. So, I mean, I sort of see it now over time, considering the trouble we're still in because we're so deeply dug into fossil fuel, as kind of a passing technology. Like, I just don't see how it's something that's going to go forward because there are long-term too many problems. But the thing I wanted to comment on before we get into this, which is great, is the timeline. Because building a nuclear power plant takes a long time. We've had a couple of plants that are supposed to be built here in the UK, and they've been really slowed up for various reasons, mainly because they started with like Chinese contractors and that they hadn't coordinated it very well, and then politics got in the way, et cetera. It's a huge project, and do we have the time? So I wanted to just go back to the IRA to say, what do we think is the timeline here? Because I noticed the last comment is September, the last time you can get a rebate, I think was September 2031. So what's the design of the act? Is it pushing people to do stuff now? Is it long-term? What's the political pressure here to get stuff done? How are people going to respond at the time? My God, I want to do this tomorrow, or what do we think about that?
I believe the timeline, the rebates were to, some of them to 2032 and some to 2034. All of them differed. So I think they're looking at a 10-year, generally a 10-year period, but they won't mostly be available until 2023, but that's around the corner. So that's why we were telling people to prepare, find out what you need, hire those contractors if you can.
Dana, if it is in fact doing a solar array installation where you are creating a large solar footprint for a community that would be within the grid, does the rebate start with the planning of such a facility, with the initial construction over a long period? Once, if you're within the period of time and you begin construction or you begin planning, are you in, or is it completion of the project?
That's a good question. That's a good question. You know, when did you build it? And when did you start it? And if it's for a whole community, is it 14,000? It says 30%, but if it's for a community, it's going, are they individuals building it in the community? I don't think so. It's the overlaying political structure, if it's a mayor or a city council. So I think that those, again, these rebates will be different.
Because there's also, you know, one of the things that is being looked at is how beneficial solar is within agriculture and how it facilitates growing certain things. And are those people eligible? Is the
Or drip
farmer
irrigation
eligible? And the
different
farmer
types of-
in the collective as a collective
Yeah.
mechanism. So there's a lot of questions about how does IRA facilitate solar within a larger framework.
Yeah, this again circles back to businesses. Because if you're talking about agriculture, you're talking about businesses. And it says that they're supporting 30% of the expenditure. Yes, Diana?
Yeah, just to say in terms of agrivoltaics, there are a lot of projects around and research done on that. It's a wonderful area. A lot of big PV projects like that are done with PPAs, power purchase agreements, where you have people auction and so they have a financing mechanism already in place for that. Solar is very cheap. Now with agrivoltaics, you're talking about a structure as well. So that would be more expensive, but a lot of the companies that are doing sort of fragile crops that benefit greatly from being covered by solar, or having a tilting
Right.
thing where you can, let some sunlight in or shade as you will. They get a little
Fantastic
complex.
technologies now.
What?
Fantastic technologies that have been developed.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
great.
Advancing
But,
all
I
the
don't
time.
worry too much about them because, in fact, these things pay themselves off, and there are funding mechanisms for them.
Angela, did you have your hand up?
I did, but everyone said what I wanted to say about nuclear and the drought. And yeah, I just think if you have an existing one, okay. I mean, I don't feel that positive about it, but okay. But if you're thinking, and there are still nuclear plants being built, like, then there's no point to it. Build something else, because we don't need that.
One thing that is discussed here often, and I'm just throwing it out there, shouldn't even let it be recorded, but that in Germany, you had a lot of nuclear energy, and you had Putin, who was really owning and buying the Green Party in Germany and pushing natural gas and funding the Greens to say, shut down the nuclear power plants. And so they were all defunded, all shut down. And Germany's so dependent now on gas, on Russian gas. And that it's as if he planned decades in
But
advance.
I don't think that that's entirely the case.
But I'm saying this is something that's under discussion, and I would like to hear your take on it as people living in Germany.
Yeah, I think that, okay, the area that I live in, I've said this in our steering committee before, it's all on solar and wind power for electricity. We don't have anything else. There's no other, it's just wind or solar, and there's huge wind farms and solar fields all around. But the problem is, and I know Putin is behind it, but I blame Gerhard Schroeder when he went to work for Gazprom. And one of the things that happened, it was either right at the end of his term or right after, was that they gave a credit to switch out your heater. And a lot of people to get new ones, because the old ones were super inefficient. And through all this pushing, we have so many people that have gas heat here. Not oil, but gas. There's people with oil, like the building I live in is oil. And some people bought electric heat systems. I used to live in a house a few years ago that had an electric heater. But it's for electricity, we're not stuck with gas and oil, but for heating, we are. And the only way I don't know. I'm not sure if the German government is offering subsidies at this moment.
I think so.
Yeah, I don't think they are.
For heat pumps?
For heat pumps. I don't
I
think that
think
they
so.
are.
I'll find out and I can get back to you.
Yeah.
By the way, I've been in the last few days going to conferences here in Europe, online, of course, and it's amazing how many people are saying positive things about the IRA. Its simplicity in promoting things, and it's been people have been very positive in the European Commission and in various associations that deal with energy. I
Thank
might
you for
add,
that
though, to
feedback.
your energy sources, though, Angela, there's also sustainable biomass like biogas, and there's sustainable hydro. Not all hydro is sustainable, not all biomass is sustainable, but when they're sustainably done, they can be good additions, and they have the advantage of being, again, complementary to the ups and downs of wind and solar.
The problem in Europe with biomass, it has instigated the complete destruction of many forests, and burning wood has never been a viable energy source.
Yeah, well, that's old
That's an
fashioned.
old story back to the Industrial Revolution and the cutting down of forests to feed biomass is a way of keeping old coal plants producing. And that's not viable and should never be encouraged. You have to be very careful in Europe with biomass and what's okay and what's not okay.
Well, that's why I said sustainable biomass, because I think it would be idiotic to cut down a forest to burn it. And
I see Sophia has her hand up,
And so does Beverly.
and Beverly.
okay, sorry.
Oh, no, you could finish your thought. I'll jump in after.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, yeah, Angela, you had mentioned for Germany, solar and wind. I had heard that you guys use also landfill gas to energy, which is very interesting to me. Is it not a big part of the grid over there? Is it not feasible long term?
I don't know. I am not that, honestly, I'm not that familiar. I just know in our region that we're all renewable energy. And one of the main problems is that the transmission lines to carry all this wind and solar are not good enough to spread it throughout the country.
Mm.
And that's a big problem. Like half the time our wind sources, a lot of them are shut off because they're just producing more energy than what we can transmit out. And if we had additional transmission lines, I think that's a project that I know that Germany has been trying to work on, but I'm not really sure what the status is at the moment.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have hit the hour-and-a-half mark. We have had a fantastic discussion. I hope we have learned something. These slides, the slide deck will be made available, and I will try to create one for small and medium businesses as well to add to our Earth Care Toolkit on our website. But thank you so much for joining us. Let's continue the conversation, and let's help educate the folks back home and our friends around us on how we can lower our energy costs and reduce our carbon footprints. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Dana. Great work.
Thanks, Dana.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.